I would like to introduce you Peter Fiske. And Peter is responsible for a big project, which is covering all the United States. It gathers 20 or more research units in US. And this project is planned for 5 years, and its budget is 100 million US dollars. And it's not just a project, it's a hub. Yeah, it's really a complicated organism of researchers. And Peter would like to share with us his insights, his lessons from this period that he's experiencing distance collaboration. I guess all of participants have a similar situation when their research projects were stuck by restrictions, and now you have to deal with it. And it's great that we have Peter with us, who will give us his experiences, his knowledge, and I would like to give them the floor. And you're welcome, Peter, to share with us your experiences and give us some hypotheses that we can test in our institutions and in our.
Wonderful. Do we have an echo? All right. Everyone, it's so good to hear you, and I miss. You all made a big impression on all of us in Berkeley. Do you want to try to address the audio? Can you all hear the echo? I just want to check to make sure you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Okay.
I'm not hearing anything.
Peter, could you refresh your browser?
Yes, hold on a second.
Yeah, sure. We are sorry for the trouble.
That's all right. Let's try. All right, is this better? Does that sound better?
Yes, now it's better. Yeah, okay.
All right, now I'm going to share my screen again.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, can you see that?
Yes, perfect.
Wonderful. All right, let's try that again. So you all, I also want to say on behalf of the rest of the faculty at the Haas School of Business, we send our greetings to you. You've been in touch with Drew and maybe with Whitney and others, and we are all doing well. And I wanted to share with you today, a little story about where I am now, and also a few observations about what we can do with this opportunity. Because you remember in our top 500 classes, we always talked about change and disruption. And of course, there's been nothing more disrupting than this last year and the coronavirus pandemic. And I have certainly experienced that disruption firsthand with my work, but fortunately my family and my friends have all been safe and healthy. And I hope that you all have been spared this terrible, terrible disease. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Peter Fiske. I'm presently the Executive Director of the National Alliance for Water Innovation. Before that, I was the CEO of PAC's Water Technologies, which for those of you in the top 500 cohort 4, 6, 8, and 10, when I was your faculty, that's how you knew me. Before that, I was the founder and CEO of Wrapped Industries. And all along, I've been writing and lecturing on the subject of careers, career strategy, and innovation. And My book and my articles are sometimes featured in Nature magazine. So it's good to see you today. My PhD is from Stanford University, and those of you who weren't in the Berkeley cohort, of course, learned your things down at Stanford. I work at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory now, and I think most of the top 500 cohorts got a chance to visit Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. It's one of the United States' leading national laboratories. This laboratory has a large number of research scientists and faculty, and we have very close interaction with UC Berkeley. In fact, you can see on this image the campus of UC Berkeley right below the campus of Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory is run by the US Department of Energy. US Department of Energy National Lab, there are actually 17 in total. They have several critical missions. One is energy. We focus on breakthrough technologies to utilize all our energy resources more efficiently and more effectively in the United States and throughout the world. We also focus a great deal on climate change. Some of the national laboratories have fundamental science missions as well, and some of them actually contain some specific facilities that are shared by researchers across the world. Some of your colleagues in Poland may have actually traveled to Lawrence Berkeley Lab to do scientific research at one of our user facilities. Because energy and the environment are so completely linked, we also do enormous amounts of research on environmental science. And then parts of the Department of Energy laboratories also work on national security and things like nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction. We look at the science of how to make sure that those weapons are safe and avoid proliferation of those technologies. In the spectrum of what we described during the Top 500 program as the Valley of Death, this is this traverse that science takes from basic science all the way into commercialization. We described back in the Top 500 program that there's a Valley of Death, where university research declines, but industry research doesn't quite catch up. And it's in this Valley of Death that the national labs sit. That's what we try to do, is bridge the gap between basic science in academia and practical applications in industry. Now you may ask, why am I at the Department of Energy when you knew me as the CEO of Pax Water? Well, you may know that water is used for a variety of energy production. Water is used in the course of extracting oil and gas. Water is used directly as power through hydroelectric power. And water is also critical for water power generation because we use water often to cool power generation systems. But water also uses and consumes energy, both in how we pump water and move water around, how we treat water for drinking, as well as the energy used for treating wastewater to safely discharge it back into the environment. So this is why the Department of Energy cares about water, and that's why they recruited me. So for those of you who know me, remember Pax Water Technologies? Well, Pax continued to grow, and at a certain point, Pax Water was acquired, that's to say purchased by another company. And friends, sometimes when a company is purchased, the CEO of the company is asked to, well, pack your bags. But that's all right. I did fine with the transaction, and that's how I ended up at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing now. NAWI, or the National Alliance for Water Innovation, is a 5-year, $110 million investment in early stage applied research to lower the cost and energy associated with desalination. Our goal is to develop a new set of technologies to be able to utilize a range of water sources that we don't use today. For example, most of the wastewater we produce in our towns as well as in our industrial processes, we throw away. Instead, we want to develop technologies to be able to reuse that water over and over again. Our vision is to create a secure and reliable, climate resilient water supply for the 21st century. It's a very big job. And in fact, we have a lot of partners. We now have over 300 organizations across the United States and in Europe and the Middle East and Asia involved in our program. And I want to tell you a little bit about how we structured this program. But first, I want to describe some of the particular issues we're facing with respect to water and water treatment, starting with the oil and gas sector. Some of you may know that in oil production, there's actually a lot more water that comes out of the ground than oil. And this water comes out at very sudden moments in the course of oil and gas production. Large volumes of water can come out of a normal oil well. And this water is very salty and problematic, and it contains a lot of variation in chemistry, and that makes it very hard to treat and use over again. We want to generate next generation modular treatment solutions that could be put in place next to the oil well and generate clean water. And that means that oil and gas businesses could reuse the water that they produce over and over again. In fact, presently, the cost of recycled water is $2.50 per barrel. We believe we can bring that recycled cost all the way down to the same price as the fresh water that they're currently using. In power generation, our power plants around the world use a large volume of water, both for cooling, but also for cleaning the emissions, the air emissions from these power plants. And that cleaning process produces complex waste streams that often require complex and costly treatment. We think we can develop new desalination techniques to squeeze out all the water from these waste streams and end up with a process called zero liquid discharge. All the water is removed from the waste, and the waste is solid and compact, and can be safely moved. In the mining sector, we often produce high concentrations of specific contaminants: copper, zinc, arsenic. And these compounds are valuable. If we had a way of extracting these compounds from the water, we could actually mine this wastewater coming out of mines and pull out those valuable constituents and use them in our operations. In fact, when you think about it, not just mining, but even wastewater has valuable constituents that could be used over and over again. In fact, some of the technologies we're using in desalination could also enable us to mine the ocean and pull out valuable constituents from ocean water. The manufacturing sectors around the world use a lot of water, and presently they throw that water away. We think we can design compact and modular treatment systems that could operate on these manufacturing floors and recycle the water over and over and over again. These systems would have to run with a high degree of automation, much more than is present in water treatment today. This means that we could give manufacturing environments high efficiency on-site water reuse, and we could remotely monitor these things. And then finally, in agriculture. Agriculture uses the largest amount of water in the world, and that water is in demand, and it's often pumped with electricity. In California, we have tremendous changes in the availability of electricity during the day because we have a large amount of renewable energy, photovoltaics and hydropower. And we can design water usage to match and balance the energy grid. So we could actually have ways in which farmers could take water, desalinate the water when the energy is abundant, and then utilize the water and turn off these systems when energy was in demand. We could pump when energy is cheap and then stop pumping when energy is expensive. And as a result, we could maintain not just an adequate water supply for our farms, but also generate a balancing load for our electricity grid. So our vision for our program comes down to 6 key terms: precise, autonomous, precise, resilient, intensified, modular, and electrified. And it spells out an acronym, of course, A'. We intend to develop new technologies to desalinate water and be able to reuse it over and over and over again. Our program is organized into 4 specific topic areas of research: process innovation and intensification, modeling and simulation, integrated data and analysis, and materials and manufacturing. And as I said, our program is designed to address these, what we call non-traditional water supplies. These are waters that we're presently throwing away, that we're not using at all, that we could potentially recycle over and over again with desalination. Our vision is that in 90% of the situations right now where we throw away this water, we could reuse it at a cost basis comparable to current water supplies. It's a pretty big vision. Now, as you remember from our top 500 programs, one of the key things that we emphasized was strategy and understanding what's called a theory of action. How do you envision that your idea is going to interact with the rest of the world? Now, it's very common when one stands up a large research program to assume that you're going to have a research consortium, a group of scientists and a group of universities that will all be collaborating and working together. And that's certainly the case for NAWI. We do have a research consortium. But when we started this program, I had an idea to make something larger. Outside the research consortium, we've created something called the NAWI Alliance. And this is a much broader, no-cost membership organization in which we want to recruit the largest number of private sector companies, other universities, state and federal agencies, and non-governmental organizations. We want to bring that group together to work with us in the research consortium. And in fact, the way we've structured things is from time to time, we actually have open funding, calls for research opportunities. And anybody within this NAWI Alliance can apply to answer some of those research calls. In fact, we're just finishing up our first research call this fall in our first year. So our vision is that what we wanted to do was create an environment where researchers and high impact research problems and research sponsors can all find each other. And in fact, while we have $110 million to fund inside the NAWI Research Consortium, we have already seen that researchers in the NAWI Alliance are directly connecting to industry partners and industry sponsors. So we started this project in February of 2020. It was a long journey, and I can tell you all about the actual contest of winning the hub if you want to hear about it. But our process was to start with multiple team-wide meetings at various national labs around the country. We also organized specific breakout meetings. We had industry-specific and industry-focused discussions of water treatment. And one of the key things you also know from me is that I believe very strongly that it's very important for scientific researchers to get out of the building. Remember that? Getting out of the building? And we organized a series of plant tours and operator interviews, because when you're doing scientific research, it's still very important to understand the context in which your science and technology is operating. We had begun a process of scientific research. We had research projects running in some of our laboratories. And in many cases, we also had scientists out working in field environments, beginning to study the problems of desalination. And then this happened. Of course, you all were in the same situation, but in the United States, we had an early indication on the West Coast that there was a serious problem when people started to get sick in the state of Washington. The last day that I was allowed to go to Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory was March 13th, 2020. After that point, they sent all the scientists home and they basically shut down operations. Now, this is a big problem for science because science doesn't just involve laboratories, but it also involves travel. And so suddenly we were unable to operate. Now, after that initial shutdown, we were able to bring just the scientists who work in the laboratory back. And so after 8 weeks, our laboratory-based scientific research resumed. And of course, all the research we were doing with computational modeling, that could proceed unimpaired because, of course, computers can be operated from anywhere. But one of the big things that happened to us was we were no longer able to meet together. The very next meeting we had planned to attend was a meeting of the North American Membrane Society. This is one technology that is involved in desalination and reverse osmosis. The meeting was supposed to take place from May 18th to the 21st in Tucson, Arizona. And we were all looking forward to having the NAWI team attend that meeting. Well, the organizers had only 6 weeks to pivot from a 300-person meeting in Tucson, Arizona to an entirely online meeting. So they had all this organization with sessions already planned, and they had to turn that entire event into an online event. Now, they did it, and they did a fantastic job. This is a screenshot from just one of the talks I attended, and the speaker here is actually speaking to us. I think he was in Singapore, and he was giving us a talk on membranes. But one of the other special things that I noticed as we were going through this online conference was that the conference organizers were able to record every session. This had never been done before in scientific meetings. So now, not only was I able to watch scientific meetings and listen to scientific talks, but I could actually go back and listen to other talks that I might not have been able to listen to before. And I could listen to them over and over again if I was curious about specific details. This ended up being a marvelous innovation. So recording technical talks creates a permanent record and an ability for scientists to review material or to attend some of these talks even if they didn't register for the conference. Now, the other thing I noticed was the chat window. Now, in my screen, I don't see the chat window for Run the World, but I know that you have a chat window and you can make comments. But one of the remarkable things I saw was how much scientific discourse was taking place in the chat window. In fact, there was hundreds and hundreds of chats going on for most of our scientific talks. And this was really exciting to me because there's several things that makes an online written text so valuable to complement a presentation. First of all, everyone in the audience can engage. You know how a normal scientific meeting is. People have to sit quietly in a dark room and listen and save their questions to the end. We saw that in many cases, people were adding supplementary information, citations, links to be shared with the entire audience at the time. And also we noticed that different researchers, even while the speaker was speaking, were able to ask questions of each other. The other advantage, questions for the speaker can be addressed while they are still talking. So as an idea comes to you, you can type out your question in the chat window and the speaker can answer it at the end. Another one, frankly, is that we noticed in a normal human meeting that there's some small number of individuals who tend to be very vocal and talk a lot. And this can often make it difficult for other people to get their question in or make a comment. Well, with a chat window operating alongside a scientific lecture, everybody can participate. And one of the things we noticed that some of the most productive and insightful comments were coming from people who might not have otherwise shared them with the audience. Now, as we began our own work, we had a series of workshops. And one of the interesting things we found was that these short, intense scientific discussions were actually easier than before because we could pull together people from multiple time zones around the world, bring them in for a focused conversation, and then disband them. And that meant that we were able to quickly answer specific questions with experts from around the world. But the big surprise actually happened at the end of the NAMS 2020 conference. And I talked to the conference organizers who had done all this work to pivot to an online platform. And they shared with me something very interesting. The cost for the 2019, the previous year's conference, which was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, were as follows. The meeting cost consisted of the venue, the hotel, et cetera, for $50,000, all the food and supplies, $45,000, all the printing of materials and hospitality and registration et cetera, $15,000. And they ended up having about 300 people able to attend. Each of those attendees paid $400. So they ended up with a revenue plus some advertising of $120,000. So it turns out that they actually were able to net out a profit on this meeting in 2019 of $10,000, and that's lovely. Average attendees had to pay for travel, a hotel, registration, and meals and other expenses, and the average attendee cost was $1,200. The cost for NAMS 2020 was very different. The meeting costs were largely the same, but the online venue was only $10,000. And of course, the food was free because it was in your refrigerator. There was no printing and hospitality. All the documents were online. And the registration cost, they decided to drop to only $200. But here's what's interesting. Attendees doubled. And the attendance doubled because people from all over the world could now attend this scientific conference from the privacy of their own home. And even if it's fairly early in the morning, if you're in some parts of the world, you can still attend the conference. The net profit on this conference was $110,000. And by the way, the average attendee cost was $0. So I have to say, I think a lot of scientific discourse is going to move online as a result of the pandemic. Now, the other thing I mentioned about the value of the pandemic was that previously when we had scientific lectures, we would simply give our lecture and we would end up sending people slides. But today, since all this work is being done online, we can capture every lecture and we can store it in a library. And that's what we're doing at NAWI. NAWI has at this point over 100 hours of almost 100 different archived technical talks on a wide range of subjects. And what's really remarkable is not only can researchers go in and then watch previous talks and get information, but we can find out what people are using. So we can use the analytics in this platform to understand who's using which videos, which recordings are most valuable, and we can also get information and feedback on the content. So this is a whole new frontier in scientific discourse. And it's certainly very different than this. Because this is how we used to do scientific discourse, right? This was what a typical meeting was like. We sit in a room for several hours, we hear a whole succession of speakers. This is how we got there. We would take a plane for many hours. We'd be in airports for hours. If our plane was canceled or delayed, we had to spend hours and hours in a strange city in an airport. This is how we traveled, in a very uncomfortable seat for hours and hours. This is where we slept, often poorly, because we were also struggling with the time change and our inability to sleep when we needed to. And so frankly, the way that we used to meet scientifically was a lot of work. And the way we can interact today is remarkably frictionless. And that, I think, is one of the most exciting consequences of this terrible disease that this planet is dealing with. Because this is your new commute to work, people. This is what it is. You get up in the morning, make sure your hair looks nice, and at least from this side upward, you're all set. These are your office mates. These are the people around you, the people you love. And most remarkably and most importantly, this is what happens to our carbon footprint. So one of the remarkable and in many cases obvious results of this pandemic was the dramatic reduction in air travel correlated to a tremendous drop in carbon emissions. And I think that, this is pretty important for us because after COVID, we have to understand as scientific researchers that travel is valuable and that we need to see each other. But the question is to do what? Do we need to all travel together to sit in a dark hall and listen to lectures like this one? Or can we think about travel and think about scientific engagement differently? Now, there's some aspects of physical meetings that are critical. But I would say in this picture, what's going on right here, a typical poster session for those of you who are scientists. This is not necessarily done best in person. It's kind of crowded, it's sort of noisy, it's hard to hear. The poster presenter is here for some period of time, but she may not be available. Instead, poster sessions online mean that you can schedule a precise time with this speaker. She can walk through her scientific work and you can ask clear and direct questions without any interruption. But there is something that's important that goes on in physical meetings. This is important. Even though as scientists we often work in our isolation, our physical meetings are where we learn about each other. This is where we share personal stories. This is where we have informal communication. This is where we learn to trust each other. This is where we learn to understand the underlying motivations and underlying techniques that people are using. This is where we learn. More scientific conferences should be spent not in the hall listening to lectures, but at specific facilities, learning how they operate. This is actually one of the things that I'm missing the most in our first year in NAWI with the coronavirus, is we had begun a process of having scientists directly visit water treatment facilities around the world, and they were learning so much directly from the operators. And this knowledge is never published. This insight is never gained through a lecture. It's gained by walking around a facility and understanding how it works. In other words, friends, getting out of the building. In some fields, the best way to experience the science is by going out into the wilderness and understanding the phenomena directly. This is more what we should be doing when scientists gather together, is going out to look at features directly ourselves. And yes, more of the time in scientific gatherings should be spent visiting each other's laboratories. Because one of the key things we need to learn in science, and one of the things that's often not included in scientific publications, are the subtle tricks and the subtle art associated with some of the scientific research we do. Even though we try to capture some of the details of our scientific experiments and we try to document that in a publication, there is nothing like visiting somebody's laboratory, spending time looking at the equipment, asking them for advice about how this equipment works, and then taking that advice back to your laboratory and implementing some of those techniques. This is when we studied together in the Top 500 program, we talked about intellectual property, and we said that intellectual property is both in the form of patents and trademarks, things that are documented, but also what's called trade secrets and art. And this sort of interaction that you see here is the sort of way in which the scientific community can share its art, the subtle tricks it uses to make successful science work. Imagine if we actually had a scientific meeting that looked like this, where you and a group of colleagues actually went someplace to understand and study a specific phenomena together, spend time together, eat meals together, and have adventures together. Instead of being worried about my travel to Tucson, Arizona for a couple days for the North American Membrane Symposium, if scientific meetings involved more direct experiences, I think they'd be extremely popular. And you probably wouldn't go to very many in a year. You might only go to 1 or 2 a year to see all your friends and have a deep personal interaction with them alongside all the online learning that you've been doing throughout the year. So I would love it if our scientific meetings were more like this and less like this. And this is one of the things that the coronavirus has taught me. So COVID-19 has challenged us to rethink every aspect of how we work and how we innovate. We're being forced to abandon the traditional methods of scientific discourse, and this has forced us to innovate beyond those methods. Geography is now no longer destiny, and information transfer and storage has never been easier and more frictionless. So as much as, it's great to travel for a few days from California to Warsaw, and as much as I would have loved to spend time with you in person, the reason I would have taken that trip was not to give this lecture. It would have been to see you all, to spend time with you all, to drink with you all, and to learn about your lives. That's why scientists should get together in person. The lectures, I think, are great online. I will also say the travel budget will matter less in this world, but some things will matter more. One of the things we've learned in the course of this pandemic in North America is that your home, literally where you work, is a really important factor now in your comfort. So your home office and your bandwidth matter a lot more now. And ironically, for a sustainability-oriented program like NAWI, where we are concerned about climate change, we're concerned about sustainability in general, the fact is our traditional scientific methods of discourse, with all this plane travel, we're creating large carbon implications for the work that we're doing. Pushing more of our discourse online, I think, can enable us to lower our carbon footprint, invite more people into the scientific discussion from around the world, have a richer scientific discussion about the details of the science, and then ideally come together as a group, as a family, and enjoy each other's company. So I would argue that from here on out, I intend to do the following. When I organize scientific meetings, I'm going to orient them towards human interaction, informal communication, hands-on learning, and personal adventure. That's the thing I think that will bind the scientific community together. The science we do, we can do online. All right, friends, that's it for my prepared remarks today. I know that we have some time for questions, and I would love to hear your questions and would love to see some of you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully be able to see you in person. So let's see here. I'm going to go back to the session. All right, everybody, can you hear me? I cannot hear you, unfortunately. So I need to give up the mic. Should I mute myself? Unfortunately, I don't know how to make it possible. If I do that, I'm going to give you the mic. There we go. Give the mic. There, Jan, can you hear me? Jan's going to come on in a second. It looks like, Jan, you didn't accept the connection. You've grabbed the mic, but I cannot hear you. Pavel is grabbing the mic. Pavel, here you go. I'm going to let Pavel request the mic. Okay, Pavel, you try. I'm going to give you the microphone. Let's see if you can work. There you go, Pavel.
Good presentation, indeed.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Interesting and good presentation. I think that's, whole world has to be changed dramatically, definitely, because, some trends were boosted lately. So we expect a lot of changes, actually. So what you said about the traveling and so on, I think traveling will be constantly the way to get the knowledge, but people will for sure try to analyze the necessity of this travel, actually. Yeah. If it's not necessary, if you can do it remotely, no problem. But if you can do on your own, maybe get some benefits from being at the site, it really it could be really helpful. Okay, that's my thoughts.
I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely right, Pablo. Totally agree. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Good to see you. I'm going to see if Jan can take the microphone now.
Okay.
Let's see. Jan, are you able to take the microphone, sir? Don't see you yet, I'm afraid. I can't give the microphone to you. Ula, is Ula in the audience? Oh, Lucas. Lucas is here. Goodness gracious. Lucas, let's see if we can connect to you. I can't hear you. I think you might be muted. Let's see. Check your speaker. I see you, but I can't hear you. Let's see. Ah, this is fun. This is a reunion, friends. I don't believe it. It's great. It's great to see everybody. Lucas, try again. I'm going to try Jan again to see if he can pick up. Jan. Let's see if this works. Oh, there we go.
Hi. To grab a mic, you just need to click on the left from the chat. Yeah, so everyone who would like to join could do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's great. Thank you, Peter. As I wrote, I can stand to start events like you show the travels. Yeah, it's all about top 500 innovators. Yeah, that's the value from our stay in Berkeley. Yeah, the relationships, the trust, the connections that are 10 years later. And with Lucas, we can speak as a friends before this 2 months together. So that's a great point.
We still can't hear Lucas though. Lucas, you're muted somehow. I know. And you know, this is the irony, Jan. I'm sitting here talking about the value of remote scientific discussion, but there are some limitations. We do need to learn, and I would say, Jan, this is one thing that I think is also a challenge for us. Is a positive challenge. Is now that we realize that this online experience is not just going to be a temporary thing for our dealing with the pandemic and the quarantine. If we learn to maximize the use of these tools, there's a whole bunch of things I'm going to do differently. Here's one little thing. I'm now much more concerned about my lighting. So like, I'm got to make sure my lighting looks good, right? So you guys can see me. That's important. That's how we connect. Yeah. And so they're all ways in which I think we're going to try to use this medium better. I think Jan's still trying to help Lucas connect on his audio.
Yeah, maybe someone else would like to join.
I'm going to see if I can message him. Maybe he can. Can you guys? Let's see. Hi. Let's try that. All right. I sent you a brief message, Lucas. I'm sorry. The phone still works. We can always schedule a Zoom meeting. We have 1 minute left. I wonder if anybody else in the room wants to say hello. Anna, let's see if we can see you for a second. Okay, I've handed you the microphone. Let's see if this works. There you are.
Hello, really nice to see you. I don't know if you can hear me. Is it okay?
We can hear you. Yeah,
great. Peter, I'm so impressed that you are running, so big project. Now it's online, so it's really inspiring. And if you have some best practices for us, how to coordinate such things, even smaller, it would be great to hear about it.
So I'll tell you one little thing, Anna. We only have a few seconds left, but I communicate Sunday night in a written message to all my team every Sunday. And sometimes I give just personal information. And I just share a little bit about what's happening in our week. Just kind of give people around the United States a preparation. Here's what's happening. Here's what we are doing. Here's what I hear from other people. And I find that Sunday night communication kind of has people feel like they're coming in Monday morning with some sense that they're part of something larger than themselves. I think that's the one thing, Anna, that I find most people are frustrated by, is simply the emotional feeling of isolation. And so as a leader, one of the things you need to be sensitive to is how to address for your team their feelings of isolation.
Thanks a lot.
Anyway, you guys, I think this is the end of our session. It is wonderful to see you. Please drop me an email. Let me know how you're doing. I know a lot is going on in Poland right now. Courage, my friends. I hope we showed you in America that you can make change. I'm going to see if I can give Jan the speaker, the microphone for one last moment.
Yeah, so
Let's see, Jan, if you can take the microphone.
Yeah, can you hear me? Great. Thank you, Peter, for your time. We are really happy to see you, to hear from you good news. And yeah, I'm sure we will try to organize in Poland such a trip-like research seminars and research travels. Great. Thank you again.
All right,
and
bye everybody.
All the best for you from
We miss you.
all top 500. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.